Today, though, Priscilla and I were talking, and we wanted to go through one of what I would consider to be the foundational pillars of the full day course, My Freed Life. And if you've ever been a part of that course, you know that the all-time favorite Jordan Freed formula is, you want to take it away, Priscilla? Performance
equals potential minus interference.
That's exactly right. Performance equals potential minus interference. So what is interesting about that, and I would encourage you to write that formula down. I know many of you have heard it before, but potential or performance equals potential minus interference. Whenever we use that question, what I like about it is that it can, or I should say formula, what I like about it is that it can be used in the macro or it can be used in the micro. Meaning I could look at the macro of your life and ask you, how well do you feel like you're performing? Or I can look at the micro, like for example, if I said, how well do you think you are performing specifically in the area of your health, right? So it's a really, really amazing tool. I just hung up from a recap that I did every time I do My Freed Life in person, usually within 10 to 14 days after the last or that live session, I do a recap with people. And I always like to kind of get a sense for how well are they using the material? What changes are they making, right? And today, what was really interesting is when we look at the performance equals potential minus interference and asking the question of how well are you performing, that's something that I would encourage you guys to track, trend, and interpret. Track, trend, and interpret. And what I mean by that is, what are the scores that you're consistently giving yourself? So the time period that I encourage those folks to use was about every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. And what I said to them was, set a reminder on your phone, create a calendar event on your calendar, but about every 2 weeks, answer that question. How well am I leading myself? What is the performance that what level of performance am I achieving right now in my life on a scale of 0 to 10? And it's interesting because it's only going to go in one of three places. It's either going to go down, it's going to stay the same, or it's going to go up. And the second question is always the same. Why? So if it's going backwards, why is it going backwards? If it's staying the same, why is it staying the same? If it's going up, why is it going up? And the interesting thing, though, about interference is that if we look at that formula as a coaching conversation and we're moving from performance to potential, if you didn't write a 10, right? If you didn't put 10 down, there's room to grow in your potential. So the question remains, what's the interference? What's getting in your way? What's keeping you from being a 10? What's preventing you from crushing your life? And that's really where we want to hang out today, because you've all heard me say that one of my favorite quotes is that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And I find time and time again that as it relates to real interference, a lot of it, as I've mentioned to you all, is black ice, meaning we don't know what the interference is. It's hiding under our level of consciousness, our awareness. We don't know that it's there. So in order to make the unconscious conscious, right? Like if you were to ask me, okay, great, I've heard your little quote 1.5 million times, or the quote from Carl Jung, but what's the process of actually making what is unconscious conscious? My answer would be this right here. Let me pull this up and you guys can check this out. It would be this right here. Observation and examination. Observation and examination. So when we talk about observation, and we'll get into a second, like observation of what, we'll get into that. But what I mean by that is, how many of you have ever heard of or read about or watched a documentary on a woman named Jane Goodall? Anybody know who that was? Yeah. So Jane Goodall was famous for her work. I believe it was with chimpanzees. Somebody the other day told me it was gorillas, but I didn't want to correct them in front of a group of people. Maybe one of you know. But a group of chimpanzees, and what she did to study them was purely to observe them. And if you watch the story, you know, she over time integrated herself into their community. But initially she sat from afar, and her goal was largely to remain unobserved from them, meaning she didn't want to disrupt that at all. Her job was simply study and observation. So that's the way I want many of you to start thinking of yourselves when we get into this observation of making the unconscious conscious. I don't want you to label it. I don't want you to judge it. I just want you to observe. I want you to become a studier, a student of you. Okay. Now, examination is when we look at some of the pieces that I'll show you in a second, and we ask questions like, where did that come from? How did I end up with that? Is that serving me? Meaning it's something that is making me better, stronger, more amazing. Is it sacrificing me? Meaning I'm really not, my life is being made worse. My relationships are being made worse because of it. So I really would encourage you all to think of this as an ongoing practice, as a program, right? And my goal here, and I would encourage you to write this down, my goal is to make you a spiritual athlete. That's the goal, is to be a athletic, like spiritually athletic. Now, when we talk about observation of what? There's two different types of observation, inner and outer. So inner is this right here, Teslas. Now, every time you see a Tesla, you're going to get all jacked up. No, I'm kidding. But Teslas, the first thing are triggers, expectations, stories, language, avoidance, and states. So I'm just going to take a minute and explain these, and then I'm going to have Priscilla share with you how she's actually used this with herself. And so when you think about triggers is anything that creates an emotional charge. So something that creates an emotional charge in you. Now, when I first became a parent, I read a book called The Conscious Parent. And from that book, there was a quote that said, "Our children trigger us like nothing else. And every time they trigger us, it is a call to our undeveloped selves." So whatever it is that's emotionally charging you is only charging you because there is a part of you that identifies with it. One of my clients, Oromon Tokyo, she said, and I may have shared this with you guys last week, but she said, you know, Jordan, if I said to you, your blue hair is stupid, is there any part of you that gets emotionally charged or triggered from that? And the answer is no. And the reason is that there's no part of me that identifies with having blue hair, right? So observe the things that emotionally charge you. Examine that. What is it? Here's a really great question for examination. What would I have to believe for that to charge me this way? What would I have to believe for that to charge me this way? Now, the second thing is expectations. Expectations are so powerful, they will change your biochemistry. So, Andrea, I see that you're here. If I asked you to explain to me what a placebo effect is, could you do it?
Yeah.
What is it?
So you take a pill and you believe it's gonna heal you and it heals you, or you're in pain and if I just take this pill, it's gonna help and it helps,
That's
whether
right.
it's accurate or not.
That's right. See, that's the critical piece, right? So Andrea, let's say, has critical chronic headaches, right? She goes to a doctor. Doctor says this pill has been proven to heal or to help people, 98% of people who have chronic headaches. She takes the pill, she instantly feels better, only to find out later the pill is a sugar pill. See, your body changes based upon what it expects. And most of our expectations go completely unexamined, go completely unobserved. And they literally write the script for your own happiness. So the best way I can describe expectations are beliefs of should. How you believe something, someone should be. And just notice this in little things too, like if I'm sitting in a restaurant and there's somebody talking really, really loud, and it's a nice restaurant, right, where maybe it's kind of an ambient environment, and I'm looking at that person thinking, God, that is so obnoxious, like that person, da, 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 da. Well, what I'm doing is I'm saying I have an expectation of the noise level in this restaurant, and this person is violating the expectation. But I never shared with him, hey, buddy, I need you to talk at this octave level because I'm trying to talk to my wife. And so I can allow him to ruin the whole meal, or I can adjust my expectation, refocus on what matters, right? And so that's just an example of something small. But wherever your realities equal your expectations, you are happy. Wherever your realities do not equal your expectations, you are unhappy. So if you expect to make $100,000 and you make 50, then in a lot of cases, you are unhappy with that. But really, really, really start digging in and paying attention to this expectation level, because or what your expectations are, because most of the time they absolutely write your blueprint. Your blueprint of it as a human being is just a series. Like if I could go in and log every expectation you have, and I sat back and kind of looked at that like it was a newspaper, that would be your blueprint, you as a human being. Like you all have specific genetic code, right? Like your DNA is different than mine or Priscilla's or Quentin's or Laura's or whoever. And just like that, your blueprint code, the code of your expectations is different than everybody else's. And I believe that if you want to remove interference, you need to be aware and be observing your expectations. The first S is stories. And with this, it can be multiple things, but I really want you to pay attention to stories of lack and limit. So lack and limit means I lack the time, I lack the energy, I lack the resources. And limit being, I'm not the type of person who, right, you put limits on your ability. A muscle only knows its limits once it has exceeded them, by the way. And a lot of times too, as far as limited energy, a lot of you don't understand the difference between spiritual energy and biological energy. Spiritual energy is actually much stronger. You hear the stories of the people, you know, their daughter was pinned under a car and they can lift the car with the daughter underneath it and get her out, but can't do that just normally in the day. That's spiritual energy versus biological energy. Language does not describe your reality, it creates it. So you're literally printing your reality, printing your world through the way that you talk and language it to yourself and to others. There's 3 language patterns that I encourage people to pay close attention to. The first one is when I, then I. When I get this, then I'll feel that. The second one is I'll be so glad when. I'll be so glad when the kids are grown. I'll be so glad when I make X number of dollars. I'll be so glad when I don't have this buyer or seller anymore. And then the last one is if I just had the time, if I just had the money, if I just had the relationships. Language. Avoidance, what are the things that you actively and consistently avoid? And then lastly, states, and we'll jump into a little bit of these on each one. I know it's a lot, but states are just a snapshot of your mood. It's a mood of your mind, of your body. It's the emotional experience that you are having right now. So what are the states that you regularly experience? Like I was talking to a woman this morning and she said, I have had anxiety for 40 years. And I thought, okay, so that's her observing that state of anxiety. Now let's examine it. Where did it come from? And for her, what it came from was one thing. She grew up with an unpredictable adult. There was a person in her environment that was bigger than her, stronger than her, had authority over her, and she was unpredictable. And so generalized anxiety is when specialized anxiety gets turned on and can't get turned off. It's an alert system, right? Anxiety is just an alert system. It's your nervous system telling you to pay attention. But when that switch gets flipped on and won't come off, you are creating and perceiving threats that aren't necessarily real. And it floods your system with this consistent feeling of, it's almost like a lot of what people call productivity today is a well-orchestrated panic attack. That's what it's like. And I'm not pointing fingers or making light of it. That's the case. So when we talk about how to make the unconscious conscious, when we talk about how to identify hidden interference that is in the blind spot, these are the things that we would encourage you to start observing and examining. Triggers, expectation stories, language, avoidance, and states. Now, Priscilla, I'm curious because you've been now to, I think, My Freed Life 2 times, is that right? Or maybe, I don't remember, it doesn't matter. I know at least once, but we've worked together on this for some time. How have you used Teslas in your own life?
Yeah. So, I've mastered, I won't say I've mastered them, but I've memorized them enough to where I can kind of jump around to what works best in the moment. And what I was sharing with you the other day is just that, I would say a couple weeks ago now, I was kind of going through some inner turbulence. I didn't really know what was going on. And I think one of the benefits that I've had is I've surrounded myself with people who are also doing inner work. And one of those people is my cousin. And I called him, and because I trust his feedback, and I said, hey, I can really use your help with this. And I have the state meter. I always have that with me. And I said, I'm kind of in this red zone here, and I'm not really understanding like what's going on. If you can help me, that would be amazing. And I think one thing that he's super great at that I'm working on is getting very curious instead of getting on that emotional train and magnifying and having it snowball. And one of the things that he told me, which I thought was so brilliant, was how exciting that life gave you an opportunity to exercise all these tools that you've learned. And it just kind of like, it checked me, right? Because he didn't let me wallow in it. He didn't get in that car with me and say, oh, poor thing. He didn't feel sorry for me. It was just converting that into an opportunity, but then taking it to the next level is getting really curious about it. And so that was the next thing. And so we started just kind of going through the line of questioning. So is this event, or is your response in direct proportion to what actually happened? So meaning like, is it really about what happened? Or is it about your memory of years prior with this person that led up to that? And I was like, oh, maybe it's not. Maybe this is just another call to my undeveloped self, because otherwise, why would I be so bothered? What is the story I'm telling myself about it? What is the story I'm telling myself about what it makes me feel about myself, what it makes me feel about them? And so that was just really a shift for me, because I mean, it's interesting, like doing this work for all this time, I still have like these little bumps in the road, and it's not that the problems go away. It's just that we have more tools in our toolkit. And the hard part, or the challenge, is to be able to stop myself and really get curious and examine what's really going on. And so that's where I've used the Teslas, and I kind of just bounce around with the different, the triggers, the expectations. It's funny you were mentioning about expectations. That's a big one that I work with, because, and I've heard this a million times, that unfulfilled expectations are just a recipe for disappointment. And especially when you put expectations on other people, that is like, you're dead in the water if it's on other people. So that's how I've changed it. And I should side note that my cousin is a doctor. So he's like, the part of your brain that gives you anxiety is the same part of your brain that is excitement. So just convert it into excitement. Tell yourself you're excited and not that you have anxiety. And so that's been very helpful too.
Yeah, and I love that, Priscilla, and I wrote down for all of you the thing that she said, because I really, how exciting life is giving you the opportunity to practice all of these things, or all these amazing things you've been learning. That's a really good pattern interrupt, right? And one thing is that you don't even have to have another person always to do that. You could take it and flip it into a question, like, how exciting is this? What is the opportunity life is giving me so that I can practice all these amazing things that I've been learning? So then you take it and flip it into this question. And from there, you can start to, really use that in a productive way, right? Another thing I wrote down as you were sharing that is similar to what you said, but unshared expectations are premeditated resentments. So if you have an expectation of somebody else that you have not shared with them, you've not explicitly shared with them, and it may be because you're not even aware of it, right? That is a premeditated resentment. You're setting the stage to feel discontent with that person. So one thing that she referred to, and this is something that I know I've mentioned to you all before, but she talked a little bit about the state meter. And one thing that has been very, very effective for many of the people that I've coached over the years, and I hadn't named it up until recently, but I call this the state ladder. And what I've been encouraging people to do is to complete or climb 2 state ladders. And when I mean ladder, I mean like you climb up a ladder, 2 state ladders a day. So let me show you what I mean by this. And if you want a copy of the state meter, Laura, would you mind grabbing that off of the site and popping it into the chat box so that everybody has a copy of that if they want to download it? But this is the state meter right here. And again, we've been over this, but down at the bottom, first, they segment into 2 types. There's suffering and blessed. So think negative on the left, positive on the right. Then on the left-hand side, there's charged, which think high energy. And then there's calm, which is low energy. And when we talk about the completion of a state ladder, what I want that to be is you're climbing from one state to another, okay? And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. But the first question, or the first thing that I want you to get is that you have the ability to create self-induced states of choice that you can, with enough practice, you can begin to make yourself feel whatever it is that you want to feel. And yet when we look at a ladder, these are the 4 questions that complete a ladder. So it's right here. So one is, what am I feeling right now? It's best is, as she said, she has this printed off laying around different parts of her house and that type of thing. But it's best to absolutely put your finger on what it is that you're experiencing right now. So if I'm feeling angry, right, then I'm going to put my finger on anger. I have just now grabbed hold of the first rung of the ladder. Then, how have I produced this feeling? See, what we want there is for you to take responsibility. And you've all been told, you made me so mad. And we all know that I can't make you do anything. If I can make you mad, then I can also make you send me all the money in your checking account. And if I can't make you do that, then I can't make you mad. Now, you interpreted what I did or what I said, and you produced the feeling of anger. But I want you to get really clear about that, because the way that states are produced are through these 3, in NLP, they call them modalities, but body, language, and focus. So if you think about it like how an angry person uses their body, a lot of that's probably going to start with their face. Like, what does an angry person look like, right? So you hold your face in a particular way, you breathe a particular way. If you're standing up, your muscles are tense, they're clenched. There's all these things that happen, right? But you can use this right here as kind of a system check, right? So how did I produce this? Well, how am I using my body? What language am I using? And ultimately, what am I focused on? And then inside of those 3 things, there are, I believe, up to 6 different things that you can look at to become hyper aware of how you're producing this feeling. Then the third one is, what is it that I want to feel? So if most people don't walk around saying, I want and enjoy the feeling of anger, most people don't look at it that way, right? So what is it that I want to feel? And again, if we go back to this, I want you to be very, very specific. If you're being negatively charged, maybe where you want to go is down here. into restful or chill. That's one that I like, is to be chill. Okay. And so then we go to, well, how must I use my body language and focus to create that feeling? So how does a chill person use their body? How do they use, what words or tonality, the tempo, how do they create their experience with language? And then focus. Now, the thing about focus is, remember, focus is ultimately controlled through questions. So a calming question for somebody who's angry might sound something like, Priscilla, I'm wondering, is this something that you will still be upset about a month from today? And if the answer is no, okay, cool. Can you tell me how long we're going to be upset about this? Like, is it going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Are you thinking like an hour? Every time something is 3 hours, I always call it Braveheart long. How many of you have ever seen Braveheart? Remember Braveheart, like the greatest movie ever? Is it Braveheart long? Is that how long we're going to be angry? And see, the whole idea here is just to break up this pattern of anger, right? Now with my kids, it would be, are you going to be Bluey mad about this? Because Bluey is like this amazing little Disney character and they only have 7-minute episodes. So we're only going to be angry Bluey length of time. But that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is that when you take the time to use the state meter, as we just showed you, and you just answer those 4 questions, and ideally I'd like for you to write them down. Because what writing down does is similar to when we say, hey, you want to have somebody that you can tell on your thoughts to. Writing something down has a very similar impact because it has to pass through the logical part of your brain. And when you write something, similarly to saying something, it's like it was caught in the nightclub of your imagination with all the lights and the color of the music and all the drama. And it went outside and now it's quiet. That's what happens when you write or speak things, when you tell on your thoughts, so to speak. But that right there is a state ladder, just answering those 4 questions. And what I would like for each and every one of you to start doing is 2 state ladders a day. That's it. And it doesn't have to mean like, oh, I'm all pissed off or I'm all depressed. Like, pathology does not have to be the catalyst. It could just be a timer that you set. Like, it's almost 3 o'clock here, right? Like, you have a timer that goes off at 3 o'clock. This shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 minutes. So the timer goes off. What am I feeling? How am I producing this feeling? What do I want to feel? Hey, if you find out that you're in a feeling you don't want to get rid of, then just get rid of 2 and 4 or 3 and 4. You don't have to complete the whole ladder. But I just want you to start practicing that, because what it does is it's going to bring observation and examination to your states. And it's going to bring a lot of that unconsciousness into your conscious awareness. Priscilla, is there anything you'd add to that or anything that you would say to plus that up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a practice, right? Like, just getting really into the practice of it. I actually kind of joke that when I'm having these emotions and I'm like, oh, my spiritual being is having a human experience, I just kind of like lighten it up with myself. I think that's another thing too, is I used to take myself so seriously. And I think just adding some humor into it and going through these exercises and asking these questions really helps me a lot too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. So before we shift gears here, I want to make sure that everybody understands, right? So interference is often hidden. You can't solve problems you are not aware of. Making the unconscious conscious. And look, you will never hear from Priscilla, Jordan, or I that there is only one way to do it. This is just a way that we have found, right? Anybody that says, I have the way, like grab your wallet and leave. But one way we have found to make the unconscious conscious is through the observation examination loop. Observation of Tesla's expectations, stories, language, avoidance, and states. So before we shift gears, I see that there's some things going on in the chat box, and I'll go back in here and answer this. So Andrea, one thing that is helpful for me in acknowledging the anger or feeling is to allow myself 2 minutes to feel the feels, validate the emotion, then shift to adjust the feeling so it doesn't consume me. Yeah, that's a good idea. Don't they call that like a 2-minute funeral or something, or a timed pity party? However you want to do that, I think that's really smart. And the timer is key so that there is a beginning and an end, more emphasis on the end. Christy, can you show the 4 questions again? Sure. Share screen, pull that back up. 1 second. Here they are. All right, Christy, right there. So what am I feeling right now? How have I produced this feeling? What is it I want to feel? How must I use my body language and focus to create that feeling? This is also on my site under self-induced states of choice.
Okay.
Those questions, I believe, are. Danielle says, my therapist talks all the time about the human experience, especially if I'm talking about making mistakes that I tend to beat myself up on. I remind myself all the time it's okay to be human. So right there, you guys, is Danielle has an expectation. See, whenever she is, and whatever, again, the context is, right? Her expectation is she's going to do it perfectly. She's going to do it as her brain thinks she should. But the problem is we don't even know if it's possible, right? Like that was another thing I shared with the people that I was recapping my free life with a few minutes ago, was in a lot of areas of your life, 80% is good enough. And I know that we're never supposed to lower our standards, but you lower your standards all the time, because if you don't, you can't move. So I'll never forget, I had a lady one time, and I shared this story that, you know, she was kind of a health nut, and she was sharing with me like this marketing plan that she was trying to get out, and everything had to be perfect. Every stinking like letter of every flyer of every design, right? And it's taking forever. And I finally asked her, I said, hey, what's the healthiest food you could possibly consume? And she started listing these grocery stores that were in her area. And I said, none of that's true. The healthiest food you can possibly consume is the food that you grow and you raise. So you need to grow. If your standards are perfection, then understand you need to grow all your own crops. You need to raise all your own animals. You need to butcher them. You need to clean them. Like, you cannot outsource anything if you're going to be perfect. And by the way, I hope you never become perfect, because guess what? If you do, how many people will you relate to? None people. You won't relate to shit if you're perfect. So right there is an expectation of how you're supposed to perform that you can always test if these expectations are legit or not by, would I put this expectation on a loved one? Would I tell my kid that's the way to do it? And if the answer is no, then that is a thought that originated in fear, and you need to get rid of it. Because I don't know about you, if we're talking about just marketing pieces, for example, 10, 80% done or 80% good emails will be much more effective than one perfect email. Right? So for a lot of you, 80% is just going to have to be good enough. And thank God you're not perfect, because you'd be all alone. Okay, so, and you don't get to enjoy the journey if you have already made joys in the journey. That's right. That's right. Okay, so any other questions before we shift gears here? No, cool. Okay. So the other piece of observation examination are others. And what this is, I think of it as like a leadership 360. And you can do this in one of two ways. You can hire somebody to do it for you, or contract somebody to do this for you. If you have a particular peer group that is just willing to have tough conversations with you and isn't truly cares about you and isn't afraid to hurt your feelings, and you could potentially conduct this yourself. But sometimes our true interference is not possible to be observed and examined through ourselves. We need the help of somebody else. So another piece of observation is this right here. Let me share this with you. So this is outer observation. So what this means is we have others. And typically when I've done this in the past with people, it will divide itself personal and professional. And the reason for that is because you spend a lot of time in both of these worlds, your personal life and your professional life. So the goal here, you guys, is to create a engineered board of directors and get these people. And if you're in a real estate office, professional could be your executive team, agents around you, your administrative team, agents in your office, maybe it's your market center leadership. If it's personal, it could be your spouse, children, siblings, parents, mentors. The one thing that I really want to caution you on, actually two, one is feedback can be hard to hear. So brace yourself, be ready, because sometimes we get what we ask for and then we don't want it anymore. But the other thing is that if you're going to do this, do not elicit the feedback from people that you do not want feedback from. So those that would intentionally tear you down, those whose own lives are shit shows, be cautious about who you would put on your board of directors. But what you do is, if you have these people, and maybe it's you or another person conducting these interviews, is you ask these questions. What are their or my strengths? What is it that I do really, really well? Don't skip that, by the way. What are my or their challenges? Where do you see me struggling? If you were tasked with helping, let's just use Priscilla, with taking her leadership to the next level, where would you have her focus? And then lastly, this is a big one. Where do you see Priscilla's audio, what she says, and her video, what she does, consistently out of sync? So those 4 questions asked of the people around you can be floodlights to interference, particularly hidden interference. And some people have done this a variety of ways. The most effective way is to get a really skilled coach, somebody that can do it on your behalf. The feedback is largely supposed to be anonymous, like meaning when I've done this with people and have given the feedback to them, I never name people or specific examples that they gave me that could trace them back. Again, I do think that you could do it on yourself. I do think that you could take those and put them into a Google form and send them out to people. But the good thing about having somebody else do it that knows how to ask questions is they can drill down on that. Can you be more specific? Can you tell me a little bit more? What is it that makes you say that? But that is another really effective way to bring what is unaware to the awareness. I'll never forget when I did this, and I just asked my wife, like, what do you see, blah, blah, blah. And she said, you're just so impulsive. I was like, what do you mean I'm impulsive? And she's like, Jordan, you have more books than you could ever read. You've got access to more personal development programs, and like you've attended more seminar, and like every 2 to 3 days, something else shows up. And I'm still this way to this day. I mean, last week, you guys, I have more. I am like this. I am the subscription king. Like the other day, I just signed up for this other coaching program, $297 a month. I can't even get through it. I don't even have time to get through it, but there's something in me that just has to have that or like get into it. So I noticed that I'm impulsive. And so what that's taught me to do is to slow my decision-making down. That when I feel that like, oh, and it doesn't always work, but one of the mantras that I have for myself and my impulsivity is, if it's a good idea today, it will be a good idea tomorrow, right? And so then when tomorrow comes, if it's a good idea today, it will be a good idea next week. Now, sometimes it still gets me, and sometimes it's just a good idea, right? But the more you learn about yourself, the more choices you have to make about yourself, and the better you can get at making decisions. And what I hope that you're gathering from that is that sometimes it takes the work of other people, eliciting the feedback of other people. Ideally, if you really want to take this home, it's 10. 5 on personal, 5 professional. Not everybody has 10 people around them that they would want their feedback from. 3 and 3 is I kind of find to be the minimum. 3 personal, 3 professional. But some is better than none. So if you don't have 6, fine, get what you can, and either partner with each other in this group or find a really great coach. If I had the time to do it all for you, I would, but find a coach that can do this for you. It's really, really important. All right, my free journey. So we are 51 minutes into this. I would love to know what you have gotten out of our session here today. And if you say nothing, it won't hurt my feelings, but it might hurt Priscilla's. So don't hurt Priscilla's feelings. What did you get out of our time here today that you're going to use to make your life more effective? Manage my own expectations. That's right, Amanda, but you can't manage what you're not aware of. So observe and examine, observe and examine. And you're going to find expectations everywhere. Everywhere. It's insane. What else? Let's get 3 more.
I like the Tesla acronym. I've never heard that before. And I could just tell you, when you start to have adult children and they're out of the house and they've already graduated college and they might be newly married or just out of college and not living in your house anymore, and they're adults, and you have expectations as a parent, but yet you can't really interfere because they're adults now. I have to tell you, I have to tell you, I miss the days of when my kids were your kids' age, Jordan, because when they're adults, you can't really, they get to make their own decisions, and a parent has, you can't really do anything about it. But I definitely have experienced this lately with managing my expectations for one of my children that you think they're going to grow up, they're going to go to college, you have this whole belief of where they're going to go. And all of a sudden, it's not the expectation that you thought. And so this is actually very helpful to me. And like I said, I like the Tesla thing. I'm probably going to use that the most. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think we all want to know what the fountain of youth is that Christy drinks from, because I don't know about you guys, but to me, she doesn't look like she's old enough to have adult children. You look really good, Christy. It's good to see you.
Very sweet. Yes, 51 last week is what I turned. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Nice job. So Andrea said, I appreciate the steps to fix things. So Andrea, I think you meant, is that the state meter? I'm not sure if I followed on that one.
No, just the Tesla
Oh, the Tesla.
steps
Yeah.
to examine, like you were talking about expectations, and most of our body changes go completely unexamined, and just breaking it down, and it makes sense. And I've heard you say, the performance equals potential minus interference several times, but just breaking it down like that is super helpful.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else before we wrap up for today? Anything that you took away from today that was especially helpful or an aha moment for you so that you don't hurt Priscilla's feelings?
I think for me, Andrea put something in the chat box about allowing herself to just feel the feels. And that's huge, because I've done that where I'm like, no, that's not happening. No, I don't feel that. And then for me, it comes up in my dreams. Like it stays in my unconscious until I just resolve it. So yes, thank you for that, Andrea, that reminder.
That's good. And mine is what Priscilla shared earlier, but I have a tendency to take things and form them into questions, because I believe that those are kind of the key to everything. And it's what is life? Or no, here it is. What is it that I have learned that life is giving me an opportunity to practice now? What is it that I have learned that life is giving me an opportunity to practice now? So if you think about all the reading and all the stuff that you do to get bigger and better, and then you find yourself in these moments of triggers and expectations or just circumstances, right? Circumstances that we don't want, slowing down. And it's almost like an accounting of like, here are all the tools I have, right? Imagine that you're looking at a nail that's stuck in a wall that you're trying to get it out, and you're thinking, okay, well, I could use a crowbar, but that might break the sheetrock. I could use pliers, but then I might break the head of the nail off. Like, I've got all these tools here, and I've got this opportunity in front of me. Now I get to practice all these things that I've learned. And so to me, that adds like a layer of like excitement to it, right? It's looked at as opportunity and not obligation. And that's one of my things, is that when I look at life consistently through the lens of obligation, I make myself miserable, versus everything is just an opportunity to grow and get better. So if you joined us a little late, I wanted to re-announce this, that we're making some changes to My Free Journey. We have stopped all billing as of today. No one will be billed in November. We had today's session. You will get the recording. We are also going to have the next session on November 16th at 2:00, and that will be our last session as this group right here, because I'm going to go back into the lab from then until the end of the year and rebuild this thing. At that time, we will relaunch it. All of you will be given the opportunity to rejoin. No one will be billed automatically. So you will have to opt back into the group if you want to be. I do think that the way that we'll do it new and the next time will be much more effective. I think it will give you content in a much more palatable format. And I want to encourage all of you who have not attended My Freed Life, the entire session in person, to be paying attention to our site, specifically under the events tab. The next time we are doing this will be January, Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 18th in Atlanta, Georgia.
19th.
And 19th, see, that's why we have her, right? So January 19th in Atlanta, Georgia, and we would love for you all to attend that. So thank you for being here today. We will be back November 16th. Will you send out? Yes, absolutely. Everybody will get that. It will probably be the week between Christmas and New Year's.
Is that a one-day event, Jordan? Is it just
Yes.
one, the 19th? Okay.
Yep. So you can come in on the 18th and out the 19th. But I've been told to take it into 2 days because it's like drinking content from a fire hose. But I'm continuing to cut it down. And you will now, if you step into that, will have heard a lot of it because of this, but it puts it in a very specific format. You have a workbook and you're surrounded by other people doing the work with you. So.
Okay.
All right, everybody, I will see you in 2 weeks on November 16th. In the meantime, make sure you're checking the Facebook. If there's something that you need from us, don't hesitate to reach out, and we can't wait to see you all then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.